Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer, and today I'm going to share a story that deeply impacted my life. It's a story about love, betrayal, and ultimately finding the strength to stand up for myself. For years, I dealt with challenges involving my in-laws, my husband, and the eventual collapse of our marriage. If you've ever felt misunderstood, accused unfairly, or struggled to be seen for who you truly are, this story might resonate with you. Let's start from the beginning. I met Daniel, my now ex-husband, when I was 21 years old. I was still in college, balancing my studies and part-time jobs, while Daniel was 25, employed, and seemingly stable in life. We met on a dating app, and despite the age difference, we connected quickly. For me, age was never a big deal. I believed that love transcends things like age or appearance. But for Daniel, our 4-year age gap was a constant point of insecurity. Daniel would often ask me, "Why are you with me? Why not someone your own age?" I always told him the same thing. I loved him, not because of his age, his money, or anything else superficial. But despite my reassurances, his insecurities persisted. He kept digging deeper, saying things like, "There has to be another reason, Jennifer. I just don't understand why you're with me." This was hard for me. No matter how often I told Daniel my feelings were genuine, he always questioned them. At the time, I thought his doubts were just part of his personality. Maybe he was just more insecure than most people. But in hindsight, I realized that Daniel's insecurities were being fed by something much darker, something that would slowly destroy our relationship. One day, after we had been dating for about a year, Daniel introduced me to his parents. That's when things started to make sense, but also started to spiral out of control. Daniel's parents, Jesse and Charlotte, were incredibly wealthy. Jesse had won the lottery years ago, and that windfall had completely transformed our lives. They lived in a beautiful, expensive home, and they carried themselves with an air of superiority that made me uncomfortable from the moment we met. From the beginning, I could tell that Jesse and Charlotte weren't interested in getting to know me for who I was. Instead, they seemed more concerned with whether I fit into their world of wealth and privilege. They made casual remarks about how rare it was to win the lottery and how hard they worked to manage their fortune. It was clear that they valued money above everything else. During that first meeting, Jesse made a comment that has stuck with me ever since. He said, "Not every woman is interested in love. Some women just want security, and in a world like this, security means money." I didn't say anything at the time, but I felt the sting of his words. He didn't see me as someone who loved his son. He saw me as a potential threat, a woman who might be after their fortune. I thought it was just a misunderstanding, something that would blow over once they got to know me. But as time went on, their suspicions only grew worse. Jesse and Charlotte frequently hinted that Daniel's previous girlfriends had only been interested in his money. According to them, these women left as soon as they found something better. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was I being lumped into that same category? It didn't take long for Daniel to start absorbing these suspicions. Despite everything I had done to prove my love for him, working hard to support myself, buying thoughtful gifts, never asking for anything extravagant, he began to question my motives too. He'd say things like, "My parents have seen a lot, Jennifer. Maybe they're not wrong about everyone." His words hurt me more than he realized. No matter how much I tried to prove myself, it was never enough. After being together for 4 years, I finally understood that Daniel's parents were the real source of his insecurities. They had planted seeds of doubt in his mind, and those seeds had grown into full-blown distrust. I wanted to believe that things would get better, that if I could just show them how much I loved Daniel, they would come around. But things only got worse. One evening, we were at Daniel's parents' house for dinner, and Jesse made a comment that pushed me over the edge. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's hard to believe a woman like you would be with our son just for love. After all, who wouldn't want to marry into a family like ours, with a $500,000 house waiting for them?" I was furious. I had been nothing but kind and respectful to them, and yet they saw me as nothing more than a gold digger. I couldn't hold back any longer. I spoke up and told Jesse, "I'm not with Daniel for his money. I love him, and I'm not interested in your house or your fortune." But instead of apologizing or backing down, Jesse doubled down on his accusations. Charlotte chimed in too, saying, "Sometimes, people who don't have much start to desire what others have. You live in a small, rented apartment with roommates. It's only natural that you'd want more." What hurt the most wasn't their words, though. It was Daniel's silence. He sat there listening to his parents insult me and said nothing. He didn't defend me or our relationship. That night, on the way home, I confronted him. "Why didn't you stand up for me, Daniel? Your parents were completely out of line," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Daniel just sighed and replied, "What did you expect me to say, Jennifer? My parents aren't always wrong. Some of the women I've been with were after my family's money. How can I be sure you're not the same?" I was stunned. After years of being together, he still didn't trust me. Despite everything we had shared, he couldn't let go of the idea that I might be using him. It was then that I realized something fundamental was broken in our relationship. Daniel didn't trust me, and without trust, there was no foundation for our future together. Even after we got engaged, things didn't improve. We shared the wedding costs equally, and I had a decent job by then, but Daniel's insecurities were always there, lingering in the background. His parents' influence over him never wavered, and every time he visited them, he returned more distant, more suspicious of me. It was like a never-ending cycle of doubt that I couldn't break. 5 years into our marriage, I felt like I was losing myself. I was constantly defending my character, constantly trying to prove that I wasn't after Daniel's money or his family's house. The emotional exhaustion was unbearable. I even suggested therapy, hoping that a professional could help Daniel see how damaging his doubts were to our relationship. But he refused. He insisted that he didn't need therapy, that the problem wasn't him. It was me. The final straw came on Daniel's birthday. I had saved up for months to buy him a watch he had admired for a long time. I wanted to make his day special, to remind him how much I cared. But instead of enjoying the moment, Daniel suggested we show the watch to his parents. I hesitated, knowing exactly how the evening would unfold. But I went along with it, hoping foolishly that maybe this time, things would be different. When we arrived at his parents' house, Daniel proudly showed them the watch, beaming with excitement. "Look at what Jennifer got me. Isn't it amazing?" But instead of being happy for him, Charlotte responded with a dry, "Oh, it seems she does love you after all." We were worried there for a while. I felt my heart sink. Then Jesse added, "Don't be fooled, Daniel. She's still a gold digger. She's just playing the long game." At that moment, I knew I had reached my limit. I looked at Daniel, expecting, hoping, that this time he would stand up for me. But once again, he stayed silent. His silence was deafening, and I realized that I was completely alone in this fight. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to convince him or his parents of my sincerity. When we got home that night, I made a decision. I was done. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly defending myself against baseless accusations. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer and started the divorce process. I moved into a separate room in our house and began quietly planning my exit. Daniel didn't even notice how distant I had become. He thought I was just cooling off after the latest round of insults from his parents. A week later, the divorce papers were ready. I hadn't told Daniel yet, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I arranged for one final meeting with him and his parents at a beautiful house, a house they didn't know I owned. I had never mentioned my inheritance to Daniel or his parents because I wanted them to love me for who I was, not for my wealth. But now, I was ready to reveal the truth. When they arrived at the house, they were shocked. "What is this place, Jennifer?" Daniel asked, his voice full of confusion. I led them inside and said, "This is my house. It's worth about $5 million. My parents left it to me, along with a trust fund that I will inherit when I turn 32. Their jaws dropped. They couldn't believe it. Charlotte stammered, "Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were this wealthy." I couldn't help but laugh. All this time, they had assumed I was a gold digger, when in reality, I had more wealth than they could have imagined. I handed Daniel the divorce papers and said, "I can't stay in this marriage. Your parents have called me a gold digger for years, and you've done nothing to defend me. I deserve better than this," I said firmly. Daniel's face shifted to a mixture of shock and panic. "Wait, Laura, we can work this out. Now that we know the truth, everything can go back to normal," he pleaded. But it was too late. Their apologies were empty, and the damage was already done. I had spent years fighting for a relationship where I was never fully accepted or trusted. Now, it was time to walk away. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and his parents tried everything to change my mind. They called, sent letters, and even tried to offer me money to stay. But I knew their desperation wasn't about love. It was about fear. Fear of losing control and, more importantly, their precious house. I ignored them and focused on rebuilding my life. Nearly a year has passed since I filed for divorce, and I've never been happier. I moved into my own place, started therapy, and found a job that I love. I've gone on a few dates, but for now, I'm focused on myself and my own happiness. As for Daniel and his family, I've heard through the grapevine that they're struggling financially. The legal fees from the divorce are piling up, and they're even considering selling their house to cover the costs. But honestly, I don't care anymore. Their problems are no longer mine. Looking back, I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned. I learned that love without trust is empty, and that I deserve to be with someone who values and respects me. Leaving Daniel was the best decision I ever made, and now I'm free to live my life on my own terms.